Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, and thank you so much for tuning in today to my ETCG1 channel. And here on ETCG1 I start things off with, hey, if it's your birthday, happy birthday. Please enjoy this digital confection I found for you. Now, some may say I've gone over to the dark side by doing this, and what I've done specifically is last week I had a business trip in San Diego. I needed to rent a car while I was there, so I decided to rent an electric vehicle. Never driven an electric vehicle before, ridden in them, but never driven one, and I figured, well, I got a couple of days in San Diego. Seems like the perfect place to try out an electric vehicle, right? So that's what I did. I had my choice at the rental company of several different electric vehicles. I think there was a Polestar, I think there was a Chevy Bolt, but also there was a Tesla, a couple of Teslas that were there. And given that I've seen more Teslas on the road than anything else, that's the one I went for, since that's the experience a lot of electric vehicle people seem to be having right now. And these are my thoughts. All right, driving an electric vehicle, it's true what they say, instant torque all the time, no matter what the speed. It's kind of cool when you go to merge on the highway, or you need to get around somebody while you're on the highway, something like that. Or just any number of instances where having instant acceleration is super helpful. That was great. The one thing about it, though, was the way it was set up, and you could change a lot of things, and I'll get to the interface in a minute, but the way this particular car was set up to where when you let off the accelerator, the car would immediately start regenerative braking and start slowing down. Now, there was one thing that I did do some research on to find out if it did this or not. I wanted to know if when you did that, the brake lights came on, and they don't. So if you're behind a Tesla and they slow down suddenly, well, it may not necessarily be their brake lights aren't working, it's that it's going into regenerative braking. So I highly recommend you do not tailgate a Tesla because, like I said, if they let off the accelerator, it might start slowing down immediately. I did kind of like this feature, and one of the reasons was because you could almost drive with one foot. So as you're cruising up to the stoplight, you just let go of the accelerator pedal and it starts to slow down. And if you're fortunate enough for the light to turn green by the time you get there, well, you just hit the accelerator and you go. It's kind of nice. It did take some getting used to as far as the interface. Now, for those of you that haven't been in a Tesla, it's a very Spartan interior, like the most Spartan interior I've ever seen. All there is seats, a console, a couple of cup holders, and a giant iPad, a steering wheel, a brake pedal, and an accelerator pedal. That's really it. Now, what this does is this makes manufacturing those vehicles that much cheaper because you don't have an instrument cluster that you're manufacturing separately or anything like that. Like I said, you just got this giant iPad and everything goes through the iPad. Your speedometer, your navigation, all your HVAC controls and everything all go through that stupid iPad thing. So if you were to ever lose power in your electric vehicle, well, you'd be kind of up a creek because you can't open and close the doors. You can't do anything without any power. So I can see how range anxiety is really a thing. Now, just driving around, I never really got the chance to run the battery out and I didn't have the opportunity to charge it, but I did play around a little bit to try to figure out where the charge port was and how all that stuff worked. And on this particular Model 3 that I got, it was behind the left taillight assembly. You just push basically an icon on the dash, you push it and it pops open, you can charge it, put it back. And all of that. But yeah, I was like a hawk watching the battery meter to make sure that I wasn't going to run out. And speaking of that, now I rented this car and I was excited because initially when I did the rental, it was about $10 to $20 cheaper than all the other internal combustion vehicles. And I was thinking to myself, oh, they're trying to push the electric vehicle thing. That's really cool. And I get the opportunity to try this and make this video. Well, come to find out, when I go to pick it up, they ask me many times if you're renting a vehicle, if you bring it back full of gas or not full of gas, they charge you X amount to top off the fuel tank if you decide not to top it off before you bring it back. Well, think about it, an electric vehicle. How are you going to charge it up before you drive it back to the airport? Well, I was driving to the airport. How are you going to get that thing all charged up and then bring it back and have it still be charged? That would be difficult. So I opted for them to top off the charge, and that was $35, which is more, I believe, than what you'd be charged if you were to top off a fuel tank. So I think that's how they get you. They lower the price of the initial rental, but then they hit you with, well, most likely you're going to have the charge topped off, so that's another $35, sir. Thank you very much. So watch out for that. So if you're renting a Tesla or something, take a look and see what their policies are as far as returning and charging and all that kind of stuff, because they got me on that one. And besides the steering wheel, there were two stalks on the outside, and one was for turn signals and things, and the other was for the gear selector. So if you wanted to go reverse, neutral, drive, that was all on the one stock that was on the right hand side. And if you wanted to park it, there was a button on the end of that you pushed and you got out and walked away. It was a little unnerving because I'm not shutting off an engine or anything, or I'm not turning on an engine when I get into the thing to accelerate and go away. It was, like I said, something to get used to. And mostly what I had to get used to was figuring out the frickin' controls on the interface and trying to figure out how to control the HVAC, how to control the heated seats, because the heated seat was on when I got in. I'm like, how the heck, there's no buttons anywhere that I can find this, so I had to go in through the menu. Now, luckily, Tesla has all these little videos and things that are set up like an owner's manual, so you can go in and you can be told how to do different things. One of those things that I wasn't able to figure out, and I don't know if it was disabled or not, was the autopilot. I tried to engage that a couple of times, and I got a little dicey on the highway because it was distracting me too much, so I just stopped doing it. But I wish I would have been able to work out that autonomous feature, but as far as driving it on the highway, it was actually pretty nice driving on the highway. It was nice driving it around the city. It was just a nice car to take from point A to point B once I figured out the interface. That was frustrating, trying to figure out where everything was, but once I got used to it, I got used to it. I hate to say this, but that is the future, especially kids growing up today, and a Tesla might be in the family or some other electric vehicle, and they might learn how to drive on it, and that may be all they ever know. So as far as technology, it was technology centric. It was really heavy on the techno side of things. I think most modern vehicles are, but it seemed in particular this Tesla was. And it seemed like really that was what it had going for it, because like I said, there's nothing in the interior. It's like, here you go, here's a car. Here's an iPad, drive it. That's all you get. In fact, when I went looking for the mechanical bits, I could only find one place on the vehicle where I could remove a cover and actually look down inside. Underneath, it's all covers. So it's for aerodynamics or what have you. But the underside is completely encased. I'm just thinking of parts manufacturing going forward. There's so much less involved with making an electric vehicle. Yes, the batteries are expensive, but they're working on that. But other than that, I mean, you got a motor, a battery, a control unit, and a few other bits that are in there, and not a whole lot. And that means, like, just think of an automatic transmission. I wager there are more parts inside of an automatic transmission in the entirety of an electric vehicle. And I think that's appealing to a lot of manufacturers because less stuff to manufacture, especially small little metal bits that have to be precisely machined like in an automatic transmission. You don't have to do all that. You just make a motor and some gearing and some axles and some other stuff, and away you go. I could see this as the future. Does it mean that I'm happy about it? Not necessarily. And for a time I was considering making an electric vehicle, and I still am thinking about taking some older vehicle and electrifying it just to try it. But after driving a Tesla, I'm not so sure about that. I almost think I want to keep the vehicle as intended, and this is why. Just for poops and giggles, I looked up how much a Tesla Model 3 weighs. Just throw out a guess. Let's see if you're close. Well, it weighs 4,500 to 5,000 pounds. That's more than 2 tons in a vehicle. That's like going back to the 1970s and driving like a Buick Riviera or something like that. Those things weighed 2 tons. Or an F-150, I think just weighs a little bit more than that. I think F-150s are around 6,000 pounds. So you're just about 1,000 pounds lighter than a Ford F-150 when you're driving down the road in one of those things. Think about that. That's a lot of weight. That's a lot of mass that you have to stop, that you have to move. That requires energy to do that. And that's the weight of the batteries. So the weight of electric vehicles is an issue. And they're even talking about the tires and the pollution that's created from those tires because they wear out quicker on an electric vehicle than they would on other vehicles. Why? Because it weighs so dang much. So electric vehicles and tires, I think that's going to be an issue. I don't know how much more service work outside of that is going to be there, but because of their weight, which is significant, that certainly plays a factor in all this. And if I was going to retrofit an older vehicle, which already might be heavy, and add even more weight to it with batteries and such, yeah, I could add less batteries, but that would decrease my range. So there's a lot of engineering thought that has to go into something like that. Not that it couldn't be fun, but still, it's something to think about. So the main takeaway from the whole thing, I did have fun driving a Tesla Model 3 around California. I felt right at home. And especially with gas prices the way they are in Southern California, I didn't feel bad about not having to stop for fuel. I thought that was really great. But again, it weighs a whole lot. There is no way to get into the vehicle or do mechanical things to it that I can discern. In fact, just to get into a Tesla, this is how you do it. And in fact, I had experiences in Vegas. I rode in a Tesla before I actually drove it, but you push the back of the door handle, the front pops out, and then you can pull it open. So that's how you open the door on a Tesla if you're confused by that. So here's one major thing about the electric vehicle that, well, I'm certain my wife would frickin' hate, and I didn't necessarily like. I was in Southern California, which has beautiful weather. It's like mid-70s to 80s all the time in San Diego, which is great. But the HVAC in a Tesla sucks. It just flat out sucks. In fact, I looked on the rental agreement after the fact and it said no air conditioning. It literally says no air conditioning. Even though the vehicle has air conditioning, it says no air conditioning, and it might as well say it has no air conditioning because, frankly, it didn't work all that great. On top of that, a Tesla has basically a glass roof. So you've got a glass roof, a black interior, a sunny climate, and no real AC. That didn't necessarily work out. I mean, I could deal with it. I'll drive the windows down all day long, but my wife, nah, she's not going to do that. So if it doesn't pass the AC test, and this electric vehicle did not pass the AC test. Also, I wonder what it's like in extreme climates. Like, that was a fairly moderate climate, mid 70s to 80s. What about in the 120 degrees south in Texas or something like that? Or maybe I'm up in Calgary at minus 40 or something like that. You know, how is that vehicle going to react in those situations? That's when electronics and batteries start to break down in extreme temperatures. Well, and I'm not saying internal combustion doesn't have their issues then, but we've got block heaters, we've got ways to deal with that. And that brings me back to another point. Electric vehicles at this point are in their infancy. They're like internal combustion was when the Model T was out. So it wasn't necessarily the greatest then, but we developed over time and made it better. I'm hoping the same thing happens with electric vehicles. We make them better and they become more efficient and lighter along the way, because right now they are freaking heavy. So here's my overall takeaway of the electric vehicle. It was fun to drive, difficult to learn, to get to know, but once I did, I was able to use it. Really freaking heavy. Electric vehicles are really heavy, and that's going to mean tires. I also wonder about, in the event of a collision, how that works. So if you get in a collision with a Tesla Model 3 and you're driving like an 89 Civic, how's that going to work out? Maybe not so good. I guess the same as it would if you'd hit an F-150. Heavy electric vehicles, I'm not so into that. Also, that's not efficient. If you're trying to move something from a dead stop and it's heavy, you have to it requires more energy to get it moving. So you're using up a lot of electricity just to move around that whole heavy chassis that you've got. So that I don't like so much. The HVAC, well, the one I was in totally sucked. There might be better ones out there, but Tesla Model 3 sucked. The air conditioning was virtually non-existent. It seemed like it was trying. And the other thing is it seemed like it was always on. So when I got in the vehicle, it would automatically turn that on. And if I was sitting there trying to find directions or something, yeah, it was nice to cool off, but here I am thinking about the battery the whole time. Like, why are you eating up the battery? How can I just turn you off just to shut up so I can sit here with the windows down and look at what I need to look at? Anyhow, cool, but needs some work. But again, if we go back to the turn of the last century, the turn of the 20th century, when internal combustion vehicles were new, we were driving like Model Ts. And you look at that compared to what we were driving in the 50s and then in the 90s, very different in that 100-year span. I'm assuming the same thing will happen with electric vehicles. They'll get lighter, better, more usable, that kind of thing. Autonomous, I think that's also going to be a part of it, and I've done videos about how I feel vehicle ownership is going to going forward. And it's not necessarily, I think, an ownership model, at least in my mind. I'll post a link to that video down in the description, along with additional videos, information, and stuff. So please check the description. It's got more stuff. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications to know when I post new videos. Thank you so much for watching today. Oh, yes, and ericthecarguy.com is always there if you have automotive questions. Also linked in the description. Get the picture, check the description. Thank you so much for watching today. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty, and I'll see you next time.